Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, guys. Good evening. Welcome. We're here with our second episode of the GASAM capacity building. Welcome, welcome. I'm Abdullah Waibojam. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a second year computer science student and I'm currently the PRO of GASAM. I'm here with my honorable, I'm here with my co-host and our
Honorable.
honorable guest as well. Yeah, I'm kind of fond of calling people honorable lately. Yeah,
Okay, honorable, yeah, yeah. Not me.
yeah.
Anyways, yeah, so glad to be here. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Mamad Jase, and I am a final year pharmacy student in the Kingdom of Morocco. And I will be hosting today's webinar together with Abdullah and our amazing guest, Yahya. Looking forward to, the insights that we'll be having from our guests. Yeah,
Yeah, this is going to be memorable, I'm sure.
exactly.
Without further ado, I will give Yaya the floor to introduce himself. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you, Mamad and Abdullah. It's been a pleasure to be invited here and to engage with the Gassam community. My name is Yahya Touray. I am a monitoring and evaluation specialist working in the security sector and governance sector, and also the development sector at large. So my background is that I graduated from Morocco in 2019 with a degree in business administration and human resources management, and also an associate degree in law. And since then, I've been working in a number of international organizations, specializing in monitoring and evaluation, including project management in broader terms. So I've worked with GIZ, the MRC, Chalfont International. I'm currently working for DCAF, Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance. Prior to that, I've worked with GASM in a number of different capacities, including in my capacity as Vice President, General Secretary, and also Chairperson of the Electoral Committee. And yeah, thank you once again for inviting me here.
thank you very much, my boss. We are glad to have you, really. Yeah, and again for viewers, GASAM is an international. It's the Gambia Students Association here in Morocco, and this show is the capacity building program. This is so geared to sorry, Mama, sorry, I think I will let Mama do that. Yeah,
Yes, thank you
there you
so
go.
much, Yahya, for that wonderful introductions.
So,
It's so good to have you back on this platform. For you to share some of the insights that you have on this team that we'll be having today. So we're so excited to have you. So, for the viewers who are watching us, this is called the Gazam Capacity Building Training Program. This program is brought together. It is brought to you by Gazam Executive, who are working tirelessly to make sure like students in Morocco not only feel like they belong, like being away, but it's a program that is also enabling to having guests, professional in different sectors to give us some insights and some particular skills and knowledge that would be beneficial for us to to become competent in whatever fields that we are. So this is going to be the second episode, and today we will talk about a theme that is very important, especially in this modern world that we are. So we will talk about leveraging real-time monitoring and evaluation um, for adaptive project management. So Yahya would give us a presentation on that. And then, yeah, we're looking forward to learning so much from you again.
Thank
yeah,
you.
definitely. Thank you. And again for viewers, like I've been saying, GASAM has been around for a while. It was established in 2020 in 2004 November 25th. So we've been around for a while, and GASAM is the students Association in Gambia Students Association in Morocco. GASAM was established in the main aim to put in all students under one umbrella, like all the students here. So yeah, and then welcome Yaya once again, and then Mama, thank you, thanks for having you all here. Yeah, so let's hit it. Thank you. So without further ado, I'll give our Mr. Yaya, and then to continue with his presentation. Thank you. Um, Said
Oh,
starting. Should I start your presentation, or is it okay with you to present?
okay, I'm trying to
Mhm.
share it.
Okay.
Maybe okay, maybe you can share it for me if that's
No
possible.
worries. No worries. You can do
Okay.
that. You can do that. Okay. Okay. In a minute. Okay. Thank you. So I guess we can proceed.
Okay. Will I have control over the slides from there?
Oh, I believe no, I will be the one, but you can let
Okay.
me know. Scroll by. Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's fine.
Okay.
All right. So, thank you once again for having me here. It's great to see Gassam really progressing well. Since I was last there, and it's always happy to give back. To our community, to whom I owe so much. Most of the skills that I've been sharing here today, I can confidently say that a lot of those skills I developed it whilst I was still a student in Morocco, and mostly outside of the classroom. GASAM is an association that allowed many of us to really express our ideas into reality. So that's just one point I wanted to make. Yeah, so I'll be presenting on leveraging real-time monitoring and evaluation for adaptive project management. Project management is an evolving field. It is quite broad, and within the international development sector, monitoring and evaluation is emerging as a very important function and key part of any project team and project function. So we will be presenting on what exactly M&E means and how we can actually adapt that for project management and how we can ensure that it's serving its purpose. You can go to the next slide.
Mhm.
Yep, you can also move. Mhm. So what is monitoring and evaluation? So in the past, um, we would only use the first two letters, right? Monitoring and evaluation. But then over time, this concept has expanded to include the terms of accountability and learning. And this essentially underpins the importance of using M&E not just a tool to show how whether a project has been successful or not, but then to constantly learn from what we're doing and see how we could improve it in real time so that we can make adaptations to our projects, ensure that they are successful. Many projects have failed because they failed to learn during the lifetime of the project, and every project has a finite lifetime. So it has a definite time, it has definite resources, it has fixed objectives. So let's first look at what monitoring is. Mhm. So monitoring is the continuous and systematic collection of data to provide information about project management. So the keyword here is continual. It is a continuous process that is conducted on a periodic basis, which means data is collected using systematic approaches, And then we will look further ahead in the presentation. What are the different methodologies that we could use to ensure that we are collecting data that is of good quality, and more importantly, that is useful to inform you about how the project is going. And next, we'll look at evaluation. An evaluation is a user-focused, systematic assessment of the design, implementation, and results of an ongoing or completed project. So the key here word here is assessment. It's always important to understand whether the project that you have delivered has met the objectives that you had set at the beginning. And it is also important during the lifetime of the project to also evaluate whether, to what extent have you met your long-term objectives rather than waiting at towards the end. Okay. Then we have accountability. And accountability is basically the commitment to balance and respond to the needs of stakeholders, right? So in any project, you have a bunch of stakeholders, including the donors, the project team, the different partners and participants and beneficiaries. So these are all stakeholders who have an interest in the project, right? For example, the donors are interested to see that their money is spent wisely and that is actually serving the purpose for which it was given, whether this is within the framework of education or economic development, agriculture, or health. They want to see that their money is well spent, whereas the project team wants to ensure that they meet the requirements of the donors, that they are actually having the impact that they want. And the beneficiaries want to have tangible benefits from any project that they are participating in, whether they're being given, whether farmers are being given seeds and fertilizer. They want to make sure that they're getting quality fertilizer or quality products to ensure that they be able to implement, useful farming techniques, for example. And then we'll look at learning, which is actually the most important aspect of this meal system. So it's basically about having a culture and processes in place that enable intentional reflection and informed decision making. So learning here is all about having a culture of learning from whatever project that you're implementing. So you need to be intentional about pausing frequently, look back at what you've done, what were the things that went right, what were the things that went wrong, and how can you adapt based on this information that you have gathered. And then you will be able to make a decision to make course corrections, to correct mistakes so that the project can be brought back on track rather than waiting until the end just to realize that the project has failed. So learning is a continuous process that has to be done on a continual basis, and it has to be intentional, not an afterthought. Oh, we finished a project. Oh, what have we learned? So it has to be an intentional process. Next. So we're going to look at how we can embed this approach within the overall program management cycle. So we'll first start with the design phase. Right. So within the design phase, this is where we actually identify the different needs and objectives and the scope and the targets of the project, right? And this can be done in various ways, in which we will see in detail further along in the presentation. Then the next stage, we have the planning phase. This is where you program the activities, you decide which resources you need to implement those activities, the budget that is allocated to it, and how it will be sequenced within the project calendar. Next is the implementation phase. And this is when you are actually executing your project plan. But then having a project plan of activities is not enough. This needs to be supplemented with a meal plan so that you can monitor the progress of your project in a systematic manner, and then also plan how you communicate with your various stakeholders. And it also encompasses how you handle your finance, your human resource needs, as well as supply chain in terms of procurement and logistics. And finally, you have the closure and reporting phase. And this is when, at the end of the project or towards the end of it, whilst the project is being wrapped up, you begin the process of evaluating to what extent you've achieved your objectives, and what has been the impact. And then you also look at your budget, whether you've overspent or you've underspent, and what were the factors surrounding that. Next. So, taking us back to the design phase. Now, the first step in this phase is to conduct a needs assessment and identification. And this can take various forms depending on how big the project is and how complex it is. One common approach is to do a political economy analysis where you look at the economic, the political, the social, and technological factors that could influence your project in one way or another. This is also the stage where you would conduct a stakeholder analysis to know what are the different needs, interests, and influences of your stakeholders, right? And this is very key, because if you fail to engage, certain stakeholders within your project, you are actually planning to fail. So this is a very critical step, and whatever work that is done at this stage will determine how successful your project will be. Now, a very good needs assessment will also enable you to um, define goals and objectives and targets that you wish to achieve. And these targets need to be SMART, meaning it has to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and very importantly, time bound. Um, and during this phase, it's really common that you develop your M&E framework based on all of this previous work that has been conducted, and you could include it in your proposal development. So this is now something that's very common. Whenever you're developing a proposal, you need to have a section that has to do with M&E, and this is usually required by the donors because they want to know whether you have, you know, systems in place to ensure that your project is well monitored, that it is continuously adapting to the evolving needs of the project, or even the evolving environment, because the environment continuously shifts, right? There can be changes in government which can impact the project. There can be changes in the economy, whether there's a recession which could lead to inflation. And then, for example, your project budget, will have to be adjusted to meet those changes. So it has to be constantly monitored, and then changes made based on those developments, right? Next. Now, during this phase is also where we develop logic models. So logic models are basically conceptual frameworks that explain how you want to implement change, right? What change you're trying to achieve and how you want to achieve that change. And one of these logic models is the results framework, which follows a chain of results starting from the inputs. These are the resources that you put into the project, and that will enable you to implement activities. And these activities will then give you outputs, right? Or results, tangible results and services that will be delivered directly to the beneficiaries. And then these outputs should lead to medium term or long term outcomes. These are changes in behavior, maybe, or changes in policy. For example, within the security sector, one outcome is that maybe the police respect human rights and professional standards. And the ultimate goal could be that you have a well governed security sector that is responsive to the needs of the population and communities, right? So it is a chain of results, each one feeding into the next, leading to the ultimate goal of societal change. Now, this is a very linear model that just shows change happening in one direction. But we all know that life, projects just like life, do not happen in a vacuum, right? It's a bit messy. Nothing is very straightforward. There could be hiccups along the way, or one activity could lead to another outcome, right? So that is why it's very common now to use other frameworks, right? So we'll look at the next is the logical framework. Um, can you just click? Yes. So the logical framework helps you to provide further detail on the results framework. So you get more specific with um, what indicators that you want. What are the targets? How do you measure success, right? Is it by the number of beneficiaries that have been provided with a specific service? Is it by a percentage of people who feel that there's been a certain improvement in their education, for example? So these are specific indicators that need to be put set alongside the objectives, and then there has to be a means of verification, meaning how are you going to verify that you've achieved those indicators? What tools or processes are you going to use? So this involves, data collection in the field. It could be reviewing certain policies. If, for example, you have developed a new policy for the government to use, and all of this are underpinned by assumptions, right? Um, if you're trying to um, influence a certain change, it is based on the assumption that there are certain conditions there, right? We are assuming that, for example, that there needs to be a certain condition, a precondition, in order for the change to take place. So all of that needs to be taken into consideration, and these are assumptions are that could change. So, for example, you are assuming that the political situation in the country is going to be stable, right? If, for example, during the lifetime of the project, there is a change of government either to violent, maybe through violent means, that is an assumption that has been affected within the project, and it will also affect you achieving these objectives and indicators, right? So now we're going to look at, from a broader perspective, another logic model, which is called the theory of change. So the theory of change is a much broader framework of analyzing and presenting how a project or program wants to achieve change. So it's basically a snapshot of your program, and it's usually presented in the visual format, right? It's presented in the visual format, as you can see here on the diagram. You look at the different activities, the pathways that they are taking to achieve certain outcomes, and the overall impact of that project, right? So sometimes you can have within the theory of change multiple projects that are working towards the same goal, and the best model or framework to use in this case is a theory of change. And you can see here that it is not linear or as linear as the results framework or the logical framework. It's showing a messy pathway of achieving change, different directions, different influences. One activity maybe is contributing to one or even two or three different outcomes, right? Which is usually the case. In project management, you should always expect that there could be unintended consequences as a result of your activities, whether they are positive or negative, and then these should be anticipated as much as possible to ensure that you do not cause harm to the populations that you're trying to serve. All right, so we can move on. So this is also another example of a theory of change. So there's no fixed rule on how to present a theory of change. You can get as creative as you want. If you want, you can keep it very simple. What is important that it is very clear and self-explanatory in the sense that one can just look at it and understand what is it that you want to achieve. Your objectives are clearly stated. There's a clear link between activities and outcomes, outputs and outcomes, and you will be able to understand how they contribute to the ultimate goal of that project or program. Next. So in the planning phase, once you've developed all this conceptual framework, you've done your needs assessment, you've developed your results framework and your logical framework, or even the theory of change, um, then what you need to do now is to develop your M&E plan, or what you call your PMP, which is performance management plan. And what this helps you is to determine exactly how you want to measure your project's performance, right? Who is going to collect the data, how the data is going to be collected, and how that data is going to be analyzed, and how is that information going to be used, right? Whether you're going to use information for to share information within the project team, whether it's going to be used for reports that are going to be sent to the donor on an annual basis, or whether it's going to be used to do a final evaluation of the project. So it's really important to have that from the onset of the project, or as early as possible, because as you know, sometimes you have emergency projects that happen within the context of humanitarian disasters, and you have to be flexible and develop them as the project progresses. But when you have projects that are in fairly stable environments, it is advisable to develop it from the onset during the conceptual phase and the planning, and then ultimately implement them. Um, Notwithstanding, it's also important to have a communications plan, and also ensure that there's enough money or budget allocated. That's the previous slide, please. Sorry if you can. Yeah. Have the necessary resources and budget. Usually, typically, in the development sector, it's common to allocate 5 to 10% of your operating budget for M&E, but then obviously this varies depending on the sector, the scale of the project, and to what extent how rigorous the monitoring needs to be. And this has to be also incorporated within the larger project work plan. You need to have specific M&E activities embedded into the work plan rather than having it as an afterthought or doing it on a very ad hoc basis. So it needs to be well planned and systematic, and ensure that you have the data collection tools to do that. Next. So now this is the interesting part. How do you actually adapt? How do you actually incorporate, this real-time monitoring within your project management framework? So some of the methodologies or methods that you can use during program monitoring or project monitoring. You can use checklists to identify, certain milestones that have been met with regards to a particular product. You can also conduct surveys using questionnaires to collect data from, could be beneficiaries, partners, implementing partners, etc. Also, observation is very good, where you conduct field visits to see how certain activities are being conducted, or maybe after an activity, for example, the distribution of goods and goods like medication to populations, you can go and verify whether they have actually been delivered to the populations. You go with your list of beneficiaries, and then that's where you can actually determine whether there have been discrepancies, or maybe the wrong people who are not supposed to collected the products. And then from there you can make adjustments. Then, you can understand that there were mistakes that were made, and then once you report that back to your project team, they can come up with a solution to fix that in the next distribution, so that they make sure that the right beneficiaries get the right products that they need. Or maybe you realize during your visit that they don't find the materials that were given useful, right? And further investigation, maybe through interviews and FGDs, will enable you to know exactly what it is that they need compared to what was delivered earlier. And you can make those adjustments in your next cycle of distribution. And hopefully, this time, once you deliver it and you conduct another monitoring visit, you will have positive reviews of the services and goods that were delivered. And that is why it's really important to have feedback and response mechanisms. So you don't always have to go to the field to get their feedback, but then beneficiaries can actually contact you proactively, either through hotlines, helplines, or suggestion boxes, or maybe one. Sometimes you could also organize, community meetings where they can come and express their views. So it just depends on the context and the culture as well, to determine which methods are the most appropriate. Next. So effective monitoring is going to give you effective program learning. That is the data that you collect in the field. It is what will help you to learn from your implementation, right? You will learn what were the good practices and the best practices. You will also learn what didn't go too well. And then from there, during project team meetings, which can be monthly or bi-monthly, and even quarterly reflection meetings, you can sit down and review this data in a systematic manner, and then people can contribute ideas and solutions, and this can be incorporated into future plans. So that is why you take these lessons that you've learned and then you integrate them to make and then once these course corrections or decisions have been made, these need to be documented in an action plan and followed up to ensure that you know um, course correction. Next. And finally, you have the program evaluation. So, traditionally, what projects would do is that they would spend most of the time, just implementing, and then at the end of the project, they hire a consultant, to just do an evaluation, or they just do an internal evaluation, end of project evaluation, to find out, to measure and analyze how effective and impactful the project was. But now it is recommended that to have what we call midterm reviews. So at the midpoint of the program, it's really that is a very good time to sit back and analyze how the project has been going, whether you're on track or you're on schedule or behind schedule, or whether you're overspending or underspending, so that at the midpoint, before it's too late, you'll be able to make adjustments to your budget, to your project plans, even the design of the program and objectives to ensure that you will meet the objectives because you are accountable not just to the donors, but also to the beneficiaries and the partners that you're working with. Next. Yeah, so these are some of the methodologies that you can use, including desk reviews, tracer surveys, interviews, and focus group discussions. So once you've evaluated your program, whether it's at the midpoint or at the end of the project, you need to make sure that these results are communicated to your various stakeholders. So traditionally, what is being done is that at the end of the project you have the evaluation report, which you send maybe to your donors and some of your partners to show the impact of your project. Um, and then you can also have fact sheets which summarize basically the results of your projects, newsletters which can be distributed amongst your partners and teams, or even have board papers which can just at a snapshot show what was the impact of the project. You can also use verbal means to debrief meetings, working sessions, panel presentation, one-to-one discussions. But my favorite part is using more modern means, which include, for example, infographics, short video documentaries, using websites and social media communications, so that you increase the reach of your audience, um, and then hopefully that will present a good picture of your project. Because if people don't know what the good work that you're doing, it could get your work could be a bit meaningless. So the more reach you have, the better for the project, and probably the more funds that you will have in order to help more people through the work that you're doing. Next, yeah. So, how do we ensure that this is successfully done? There are a set of principles. Next, that need to be followed in order to ensure that you have a successful meal system in place. You need to ensure that it is participatory, not just within the team, but amongst your stakeholders. They need to be involved during the conception phase when you're developing the proposal. They should be part of that process. They should also be even part of the monitoring that you're doing and also the evaluation process. What we call, for example, participatory evaluation. And more importantly, also, is that critical thinking needs to be used throughout the system, because you're receiving raw data that you need to analyze, not just statistically, but you need to use different factors to able to come up with very good decisions that will really have a good impact. And you need to ensure that everyone is represented. If you're serving a particular population, ensure that there's adequate representation across different categories, including men, female, people with disability, people of different religions and ethnic origins. Everyone needs to be involved, and you need to ensure that when you're getting data from people, that you get their consent beforehand. This can be either written or verbal consent, but then consent should always be sought, whether you're collecting data from them or you're taking pictures of them or their property. That is just one of the ethical considerations that need to be taken. And that also is linked to privacy and confidentiality. If someone tells you that, no, I do not want to participate in your survey, you have no choice but to thank them and then move on to the next person and then find out if they also would like to participate to provide data or share any information with you. And whatever data that you collect, you need to ensure that it is confidential and that it is not shared, that only the people who are authorized to have it have access to that information. And finally, I'll end with a quote that not everything that counts can be counted. Sorry, I think that not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. So sometimes you might be a little bit over ambitious just to go collecting data, only to find out that you only need 10% of the information that you've collected. So the other 90% was just a waste of time and resources that could have been invested elsewhere. So you always need to be strategic about the data that you collect. Ensure that you only collect what is needed and what can be used to improve the program. Yeah. So thank you very much. I hope you've learned just a little bit of the knowledge that I have. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you very much. Mr. Yaya. Mr. Touray, that was exceptional. Honestly, I personally have learned a lot, and I'm sure viewers can attest with me and Mama Ria as well. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, Mama, so you have a lot to say as well.
Yes, definitely. Like the presentation was, yes, definitely. The
Okay,
presentation was being, like the slides, they are very well articulated, and the also you talk about so many insights. You did give us a brief overview of what the meal is. Monitoring, evaluations, learning and accountability. I think those four components, they are very very important, especially when we are to correlate it with adaptive project management. And you did talk about the program management cycle, and the logic model that we can use. And like you also talk about the theory of change, and the implementation phase are very 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 crucial when it comes to assessing and also monitoring and evaluating project management. So I'm so glad that you mentioned them during your presentation. So yeah, I just want to ask you, like, we are living in a modern world, and project management, it's a skill set that it's very very crucial. So for Gazamians and also for non-Gazamians that are aspiring to become professionals in the modern world that we are, what, what would we say to them, like the importance of adopting the project management skills in this modern world, and
Yeah,
hopefully they will go back to the video and then the recording of this presentation. So to further to further relearn some of the insight that you shared.
yeah, I think that's a very good question. Like you said, project management is very much important in any field of work. So it doesn't matter what discipline that you're studying, whether you're within the health sector, the engineering sector, or economics. At some point, you will have to manage one or two projects within your career. So it is a skill that is very important. And there are a lot of free courses online that you could access to do the courses, or if they're not even free, they're not too expensive, that you can use to at least get the fundamentals of project management. And I'm sure even outside of your career, within your even your personal life, you will do some project management. Even you're planning for a wedding, or some other event, you will have to have your objectives, you will have to have your budget, the number of people, the beneficiaries who will be attending and whatnot. So all of that requires project management skills. Otherwise, you end up overspending more than you planned, and then things might not go as well as you would like to. So just think of project management as, that has very broad application, and it's really good to invest. I think it's a really good investment. You won't regret it. If you learn it, it will be good for your personal life and also your career.
Yeah, this is interesting. This is interesting. I mean, especially for me, for the first time, like I've not heard of management and monitoring and evaluation. I could say I just had it recently, and to be honest, it has been fascinating. Like even looking into it just this recently. Yeah, and then one of the questions I have is like, what are the key challenges of traditional project management in today's dynamic environment?
I think the key challenge is that the old model of project management, is quite static. Previously donors would not allow you to change objectives once the project has started. But then now they're starting to realize that the project environment is not always, straightforward. There are changes, unexpected things can happen, and sometimes you will have to change the objectives. So more and more donors are now being receptive to, you know, project implementers to go back to them, tell them, oh, we need to change this objective because it's not achievable, or maybe it's no longer relevant because things have changed. So I think although it's changing, I think more effort needs to be done. It's just a matter of the project team knowing how to really document those changes and justify it to ensure that their project is always adapting rather than just sticking to what was originally planned, and then you end up wasting money, time, and resources, and not even meeting your objectives because you refuse to adapt to the realities on the ground.
Amazing. I mean, that summarizes everything. Yeah. And looking at how technology is changing and drastically as well. There are new ways, new technologies. However, it's also, if you don't look closer, you find it also challenging to integrate the traditional, what we know of tradition, most of our traditional fields with technology as well. So thank you. I guess Mama, do you have another question for him? And viewers, please drop your questions in the chat if you have any. Mama, are you with us? Oh, I think you are muted, Mama. Sorry.
Yes, thank you so much, Yahya, for for putting emphasis on on the challenges that people might be facing when it comes to the traditional and then the modern um, means of evaluating and monitoring project management. It's very, very important, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. So I wanted to ask this question, like when it comes to data collection, data collection. Could you share what are some of the best practice that can be used in order to ensure that we have the the like the accurate data that we need, the best
Yeah,
practice that can be used.
yeah. So in terms of data collection, the first thing is ensuring that you understand your data needs. You know what is exact data that you need to collect, and understanding how you would want to use that information. That will then allow you to determine which method would be best to use, whether you need to conduct a survey using a structured questionnaire, or whether you would need to supplement it with in-depth interviews, or whether you need to use both quantitative and qualitative data collection needs. So once you've assessed that, that will then guide you to choose your method. And once you've chosen your method, you need to ensure that the data collection tool that you're using is well adapted to those needs, that you're asking the right questions, and that you make sure that you allow questions for data disaggregation, meaning that you take into consideration demographic data such as gender, nationality, geographic location, etc., which allow you to make further analysis in your data. It's also important then to test these data collection tools, meaning that prior to rolling it out to your sample um, population, you test it out with a few individuals or respondents just to see whether the questions are well articulated, or whether there need to be changes, or maybe the questionnaire is maybe too long, because usually it's advisable that a questionnaire or an interview should not last for more than 45 minutes. That is the best practice. And when it comes to FGDs, that is focus group discussions, is usually not more than 90 minutes. And uh, when you're conducting focus group discussions, it's advisable that you allow for data triangulation. What that simply means is that you have different groups of people, so that you ensure that the data that you're getting is reliable, right? So, for example, you want to have focus group discussions with women, rather than just going to one community and asking a group of women there some questions regarding, I don't know, their farming techniques or the education and whatnot. You should at least go to three different communities, so that you'll be able to triangulate the data from these three different sources, so that you'll be able to draw conclusions that are reliable and that can be generalized to the group, rather than relying on just one group of people, which might not reflect the actual reality.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Data collection is really interesting. I mean, even brings it gives me another question. Like, how do you get into ME? Like, how do you become a monitoring and then evaluation specialist? Like, what field do you need to study? Because for most of us, we are just, maybe some of us have done some modules in project management and here and like, but some areas they don't do it exactly. So, what do you need to study to be there?
Hmm. Uh,
Mm,
there's not one right answer to this. Like, for example, I got into M&E maybe by accident. It wasn't
mm,
something that I decided, oh, I'm going to be an M&E specialist. I studied business administration and HR. But in general, from what I've seen, usually people who study statistics at the university level, but then depending on what field that you want to go into, if you're going into for example, the development sector, if you have a degree in also development studies, or any social science field for that matter, you should be able to transition into M&E. Only that you need to ensure that you have the requisite um, technical skills. So, for example, you need to be good at data analysis and statistics and whatnot, how to analyze those things. So that is a very key element. Um, and then there are a number of M&E certifications that are available that are internationally recognized. One of them is the MILD Pro, um, which is a very good one that you can do. So, so basically, there's not one fixed rule, but generally they ask for people with degrees in business administration, statistics, development studies, and social sciences in general, or maybe even economics. So what is more important is to get the technical skills, ensure that you have good data analysis skills, designing questionnaires, research methodologies. You need to be well acquainted with that. Report writing, data visualization, and things like that. So nowadays, within this field, they're more concerned about your actual skills and your degree. Yeah, so it's just making sure that you get those technical skills, and you can even work on them without having to do any formal training for that matter. You can learn it on your own. You can take courses online, etc.
Amazing. 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 Mama, do you have anything to add into that?
Yes, that answer sounds so rational because we are living in the world of technology, and sometimes you can acquire some skills through some of these online courses that are available. You can learn some skills through Coursera, and then through, like, there are so many online courses that are available. It will help you um venture into um it will help you venture into something that would help you to become a specialist when it comes to analyzing data, and also when it comes to evaluating any type of project that you want to get yourself into. So it's very important. And also, like, yeah, when it comes to project management, sometimes you need different people, like different stakeholders. um in some projects, what would you say to some project that may deem necessary for the project to be well implemented and to be well monitored and evaluated? If we have a specialist in like, for example, when we want to work on a particular project, is it always necessary to have a specialist that is going to be centered on the evaluation and monitoring of the project?
It depends. So it would depend on the size and the complexity of the project. Usually small projects that that doesn't have to deal with a lot of technical data collection. That is more of social change on a small scale. You might not need an M&E specialist per se, but then when you have very large complex projects and you need that technical expertise, you might need to have an M&E specialist who will be responsible for that. In some project teams, that responsibility is shared across the project team. For example, you have different subject matter experts, someone in health, education, or some other field, but then they all have M&A responsibilities embedded within their job functions, and it would be the responsibility of the project manager or the team leader to coordinate that process. But then, as I mentioned, for large and complex projects where millions of euros of funding are getting into it, and maybe it's going over a period of 3 years, or 4 years, or 5 years, you would definitely need someone to focus on that. Otherwise, you might not effectively monitor and evaluate the project. That is why it's becoming more and more organizations and projects are hiring M&A specialists. So it's becoming a growing field because donors and even project teams realize that it is a competitive advantage to have a dedicated professional who can do a very professional job, make sure that your impact is well captured and then well reported on, and then also to minimize the risk of failure and issues. Yeah.
Yeah. That is indeed interesting. And then hearing it from you, like a specialist in this area, it kind of motivates me personally more. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there too watching who are also really inspired by this. Because like for me personally, I don't know much about ME, but hearing this from you, I think it's something that I really want to look into maybe in the near future. Though I'm from the computer science background and I really don't have much of the management background thing, but I think it is really interesting and worth forward to. And Mama, do you have any questions maybe? Because I think there are some few questions in the
Yes.
chat. Check.
Okay, this is just to remind the viewers that this is the second episode of the Gazam Capacity Building Program. And then today we have Honorable here, and he was taking us through some of the insights that we needed on the team, leveraging real-time monitoring and evaluation of adaptive project management. So, so much has been said so far. So, yeah, I just want to ask you this. Can you please share a success story where, monitoring and evaluation evaluate for adaptive project has been implemented and it yielded positive outcome. Do you mind sharing some, like a success story?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think my first job as an M&E professional, um, I think I was brought into the project well after it had started, and there had been a delay, significant delay in the project, so the project was behind schedule. So I was brought in to support initially as just a project officer, but then I think they saw my skills in data analysis and whatnot, so they decided to start coaching me on M&E. So that's how I got into M&E, and through that process, I was able to conduct a number of M&E activities, and we were able to discover a lot of problems, you know, halfway through the project, that were in terms of the quality of the services that we were delivering, that is the implementing partners. And because of the data that I supplied, I was able to provide useful information to the management team, and then they were able to make certain decisions to change certain partners or to change certain approaches, which in turn put the project back on track. And I think we were able to eventually achieve most of our objectives. So yeah, I think that's one.
Great. That was an amazing experience, and I'm glad that it yielded so much positive outcome in that particular project that you had to work on. And Abdullah, could you remind the audience so that they can send their questions and try to engage here because this is once in a lifetime having you here to take us through this. It's wholesome. So yeah, do you have a follow-up question, or maybe we can engage the audience?
Yeah, I think I've seen a few questions in the comment
Exactly.
box.
Sorry, I was just talking. After all, my mic was muted. So I was saying there is a question in the chat. We have Abubakar So. Let me pin his question. He's saying I've been doing project management as a module in my second semester, and I find this really interesting for me. I want to ask how important is it to use MS project? Microsoft, is that Microsoft project?
Yeah, yeah, it's Microsoft
Okay,
projects.
no worries. MS project for managing projects.
I mean, MS projects is one of the many different tools and softwares that are there that you can use for project management. Personally, I think I haven't used it much because usually it requires like a paid prescription. Um, But I think, yeah, it is a good tool based on the features that I have seen that it contains. It is a good tool for project management because it basically allows you to create like a Gantt chart. And a Gantt chart is a very popular and useful project management tool, which allows you to systematically plan your project activities and also so to set, timelines, assign responsibilities to specific people, and then just to keep track of your project to make sure that it is going smoothly. So yeah, so MS Project is really good. If you can get the subscription somehow, it's something that you can try to learn how to use. And there are even some organizations who within their corporate package they use MS projects. So yeah, it is quite useful.
Amazing. Thank you. Walker, I hope that you are around and your question is well answered. And then we also have the next question from the same. Okay, Walker. So, Mohammed, can you read this one, please?
Okay. Second question. It says, when you talk about project management, what do we really mean? Does this include things like business creation, final year project, construction project, future career, etc.? And can we use the mill in the same way across all projects, or should it be adopted differently for each project?
Yeah, so project management is basically, a set of processes and principles that you use to achieve, set objectives and targets. I think one thing that needs to be noted is the triple constraint of project management, which includes time, quality, and resources. So this triangle of, time, resources, and quality, these are fixed factors, right? The project time is limited, the scope or the quality of the project that is or the objectives is limited, and also the resources that you have, that is the budget, is limited. It's for a fixed budget, for a fixed time, for fixed objectives. So that tells you that it's not used for normal business operations or normal, you know, day-to-day operations, right? These are for very specific things that you want to accomplish. So, for example, maybe within a business, right, you want to have, maybe you want to launch a new product, right? That could be a project in itself, where you launch a new software that you want to roll out, that you want to develop for a client. For example, I think you're, as a computer science, maybe you're developing a software for a particular company, and then they give you their specifications, and you want to develop that product with them. They give you their specifications, then you have a timeline for when that project is going to be completed. You set the budget. You set the different parameters that you need to have in place for it to be successful. So that's a project in and of itself, right? Then you also have, other project like construction, and within construction, usually I think they handle it on a project basis. Like a client wants you to build a hotel, or the client wants you to build a house. Those are all taken as individual projects. You need to have, a specific timeline, specific budget line, and specific requirements. And then you have projects within the development sector. Usually within the development sector, um, initiatives are delivered through projects. That is the usual modus operandi. A donor gives you a specific amount of money to implement a specific project, and it can be in different field, whether it is within the health sector, maybe it's a research project within the MRC. They want you to conduct a research on this and that, or maybe it's an education project that has been given to the Ministry of Education, that they maybe need to build a couple of schools, or they need to introduce a new curriculum. That can be a project. So it can be applicable across different fields of work, and different careers. I hope I answered the whole question. So he said also, can we use the meal in the same way across all projects? So no, so there's no one size, is it one, how do we say it again? One size fits all meal
Mm,
system. So, for very small projects, you don't need to have like a very comprehensive, you know, approach, having a lot of data collection, a lot of indicators, a lot of objectives. You keep it as simple as possible just to get the data that you need, right? For example, if it's a small project, you don't need to have to go and have like a national or a nationwide perception survey when it's just a very small community project, right? So you will develop meal tools and a meal plan that is adapted to that particular small project. It's not going to be very complicated. But then if it's a big project that is maybe a national that is going to be implemented across different regions, and you have different types of beneficiaries, you have different stakeholders, obviously it's going to be different from that of a smaller project. Your budget is going to be bigger. The your sample size will also be bigger. The complexity of the tools that you will use will be also, will also be taken into consideration.
Yeah, and that is amazing. In a nutshell, we don't use the same rule for all projects. Like every project, or at least project size, is a huge factor to determine the kind of methodology you have to follow. Yeah, and then I think he has a follow up question as well. He's saying how badly how badly do we need project managers for development of the Gambia?
I mean, there are a lot of projects that are being implemented in the country, but then you would realize that the impact is is usually quite limited. We have a lot of what we call white elephant projects. People will come with their big projects, will hear millions of dollars. They will build a very big structure. Then 3 years or 5 years down the line, all that money, or they say the buildings or the equipment, they're either broken, they're not working, they're abandoned. We've it's you have a lot of those examples here. So we are in short supply of very good project managers who adopt like a sustainable approach to project management. What this means is that you're not just looking at what is going to be the end product, but you're also considering what's going to happen at the end of the project. How are you going to sustain the benefits that you have delivered to the populations? How are you going to ensure that that structure that you built for the farmers is still going to be operational and used 5 years after the project? How are you going to ensure that the ambulances that you've given to the hospital to take care of patients and whatnot are still functional and maintained? So it means that you need to have sustainability plans. So there is a high demand for project managers, and especially M&E specialists. Yeah, there is a shortage of M&E specialists, more so than project managers. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Mama, can you check this out from
Yeah, thank you
Ibrahim?
so much, Yahya, for
Mm,
throwing so much lights on the questions that was asked. Uh, so we have another question from Ibrahim G. Jalo. He's
mm.
saying thank you for being with us, Yahya Touray. Mr. Touray, sorry. My question is on the data collection phase of a project. In recent times, obtaining feedbacks from questionnaires has become increasingly challenging, particularly for students and startup entrepreneurs, conducting academic research or market research, respectively. Could you share some effective and efficient method or strategy for collecting data?
Yeah. So when you're choosing your data collection method, you always need to consider the different pros and cons of that particular data collection method. For example, a survey has different advantages compared to an interview, right? And then you also need to consider how you're going to administer that particular method. So let's use the example of a questionnaire or a survey. You can either deliver it online, send it to people to fill, which is now very common. You have your Google form or your MS form, develop it, you share it via WhatsApp, Facebook, etc., and then you expect people to fill it. So usually, the response rate might not be as high as expected because people are usually not incentivized to fill it. Right? You have no control over it, who's going to fill it or not. So one approach is that you could actually administer it yourself, right? Rather than having self-administered questionnaires, you can have your sample size. Okay, maybe you're targeting 100 people. You go into the field, you collect it, or you have assistants who can help you to collect the data. For example, in one of my projects, I had data assistants or data collectors who I would assign, using their tablets or the paper forms to go into the field and contact the beneficiaries and then interview them to collect the data. So you wouldn't actually be relying on them to send their responses. But then obviously that would require, money and resources. So that's why you always have to weigh your the pros and cons and your available resources as well, right? Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, we have another follow up from.
Oh yeah, sorry. And you can also use telephone interview. So you don't always have to meet them physically. I think during the COVID, that we were implementing one project and we were unable to go into the field to reach out to beneficiaries or whatnot. So what we did is we had our database, and then we called people and asked them questions, and we were able to reach a very large number. And then we did not even spending a lot of money because we, instead of using transportation and whatnot, it was just the the credit or the airtime that you would use. Yeah.
Okay, amazing.
Yes,
We
I
have
think
another follow
most of
up.
us
Hmm?
familiar
Yeah,
with
yeah,
the
continue now.
question. Yeah, thank you, Yaya, for mentioning all of those methods that can be used, especially for collecting data. Most of the time, students we are much more familiar with the questionnaire, like the survey that we will send to um, the beneficiaries or the participants that are needed. So I'm glad that you mentioned those methods that can be used. We have a question from here. Can you please share some of the tools useful for project management?
Yeah, I think I mentioned one of them, which was, the Gantt chart, which is one of my favorite tools to use. So the Gantt chart is basically a way of planning your projects or your project activities using what we call the work breakdown structure, WBS. So what that means is that for each key activity that you have, it is broken down into manageable tasks, right? So for example, you want to build a house, or maybe you have a project about reforming the education system, and some of the activities, maybe you need to construct schools, you need to develop or revise curriculum, you need to print and distribute textbooks, etc., etc. So for each of those key tasks, you need to also further break them down into small manageable activities that will lead to you achieving that main activity, right? So building the schools, you need to design the schools, you need to hire a consultant maybe to design it and also to construct it. You also need to procure maybe the materials, and then you also need to monitor the quality of the work, etc., etc. So those are um, some of the ways that you can use the work breakdown structure within that Gantt chart, and then you assign responsibilities to people, and also maybe sometimes you can also allocate the budget for each activity, right? So it's activity based budgeting. And then you can also identify the timeline on the calendar, like when are you going to implement that activity, right? And usually this is also represented in graphical format. So it's not just like a table, but it's graphically represented. So you can see in a graphical format how the different activities are sequenced, how they contribute to each other, which activity needs to be done before the other, and etc. So the Gantt chart is actually is a very useful tool. And there are many others. The earned value analysis, which allows you to see how you're managing your budget as compared to your project timeline, whether you're spending too much money compared to the amount of implementation that you've done. Um, what else? There's also the risk management register. Um, many, many, many tools. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. I mean, it's all about the software lately. I mean, professionally, things are really changing. He's asking, is it OBS or
No,
double
WBS. Yeah.
okay, WBS?
Work breakdown structure.
Hmm.
But the tool is the Gantt chart. I'll
Okay,
put it in the
yeah. This is amazing and really interactive and educative. I've really learned a lot personally. Yeah. And then about For Ibrahim Jallo's question, I think you answered it really well. And one of the main difficulties that I observe around here, even like students, those doing like maybe research in maybe quantitative areas, like it's very difficult for them to have their data most times, because like most times they will either have to be sending people their forms, or maybe be roaming around with their questionnaires, and it's really difficult for them to find someone. I think that is very important. Yeah, thank you very much. Overall, this has been great, and we are really glad to have you. Yeah, Mamat.
Yes, definitely. I learned a lot from this presentation, and yeah, it is beneficial because I could relate to some at some point, because there was a time that I was uh, writing for a grant. There, sometimes you can come up with projects. Sometimes you have to write, project proposals. So I was like writing for a grant for antimicrobial resistance, program that I wanted to implement. I want it to be implemented in the Gambia. So at some point, there are some questions that was raised when I was filling the form. So they put emphasis on monitoring and evaluation of the project. So at some point, I think they do pay attention to it, especially donors that want to give out their resources to a particular project. So they pay emphasis on this. So yeah, how what advice or what insight would you share with individuals like me who wants to be who want to win grants, like grants that could help me implement some of the projects that I have back in the Gambia. And anyways, I know it's
Yeah,
somehow
so
alien topic, but yeah.
yeah, no, it's actually a quite valid question, because whoever is doing grant proposal writing is a key component of M&E, and what usually donors want to see is results, right? Usually, what helps is showing prior work that you've done in the past that is related to what you want to do, and what were the results in those previous works, right? You mentioned something about macro something resistance. Maybe you had done something similar in the past. The donors would want to see how you did it and what were the results, so that that would be an indication of future success. So that would be less of a risk for them, rather than giving money to someone who hasn't even done something, even if it's on a small scale. um, as long as you're able to back it up with positive results, that will be really helpful. So it's not always about collecting primary data, but use secondary data also. Do your research, show that you understand the project that you want to implement, whether it's on the internet or you're looking at research papers, etc., etc. Show that you understand, you have the data, that your project is actually based on that your project is data driven, right? It is based on evidence, whether it is your own evidence or evidence that you've gathered from your research, to show that you'll be able to meet your objectives. So that's it basically. Make sure that your proposals are data driven and evidence based.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for sharing that. It is insightful indeed. And you made mention of it. Like at some point, they asked about like previous experience or previous projects that I've been involved in. So sometimes something like sensitizations that yielded positive impact. Adding it to it would really help. So thank you for that. Really appreciate it. Abdullah, you have
Yeah, I think for me, I'm okay. Just that we
any
have
further
a
question? I
question.
think
Yeah, I have a follow-up question from Jay Jallo. He's saying, thank you, sir. Is survey data reli- uh, reliability reliability challenge is a common issue in project management, and if it does, And if it does happen, what are the possible ways to resolve it?
Yeah, so reliability is often an issue in terms of, the data that you're collecting. So usually if you've already, let's say conducted a survey and then you're seeing a lot of discrepancies in your data, maybe you need to review how um, the questionnaire was actually set, right? So, for example, maybe in your questionnaire you did not put any skip logic, right? If, for example, the question is asking if yes, answer that. If no, but maybe you did not put appropriate skip logics there, and then people were just answering questions left, right, and center without following, making the data a bit, contradictory. What you can do is what we call data cleaning, right? After you've collected all your data, you compile it, and then you see how you can correct those errors, right? Not to manipulate the data, but then just to make sure that it is consistent. Maybe someone wanted to write a word, but they kind of misspelled it, or they put it in the wrong question, or something like that. You can then just um, correct that wherever you see instances of those discrepancies, and that will make your data a bit more reliable as well. So that's like after the fact. But then it's always good to make sure that you test the reliability of your surveys from the onset. That's why you always need to test it in advance. Test it with a few people with a small sample and see how it goes. If you see a lot of discrepancies, then you say, okay, maybe it's the way I ask the questions, maybe it's the sequencing of the questions, maybe I'm not even asking the right questions, right? Or maybe, I'm not, the person who's delivering the question, the people who are administering the questionnaires are not doing it correctly. So that is why usually you need to train the data collectors, let them understand what the survey is about, how are they going to administer it, so that they all administer it in the same way. For example, if you're doing it in the local communities, and then you have to you have to maybe administer it in the local languages, because some of them don't understand English. You need to then translate your questionnaires in advance, right? Translate it, ensure that everyone is administering it in the same way. So, you know, people will not just use their own interpretation to administer the question. If you do that, you will get different responses because people will understand it differently, and that will affect the reliability of your data.
This is indeed interesting. Let me check if we have another question on the chat. Okay, I guess we don't have another one. We've exhausted our questions, so I believe we can now conclude and then give our remarks. Yeah. But overall, I think this is interesting. Like reliability in data collection, collecting data, and then being the data being reliable is something very important. And about what you said, like asking the right questions, and then also making sure that your questions are not like misleading, or people are not interpreting misinterpreting your questions. I think that is also very important and key in you know asking the question itself. Yeah, thank you. Mama, do you have anything to add before maybe we give our final remarks, then wrap up?
Yeah, thank you once again, Yahya, for your time, and thank you for sharing some of the like this insight with us, because it's really something that we need right now, especially for us, who are aspiring to become professionals in the field that we are. So we know that monitoring and evaluating whatever project that you are working on is very important. So you said some of the concepts and some of the tools and some of the best practices um, that would help. That would help in order that will help us to get a positive outcome in whatever project that we are working with, be it a small project or big project, like you mentioned. So thank you so much once again, and I really learned a lot, and I'm sure most of the audience also learned so much from this presentation. So yeah, do you have closing
Mm.
statements to make, or huh? Abdullah, you
Yeah.
want to say
Yes.
something?
No, 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 I'm okay. I'm okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm glad that I was able to respond to their questions. I hope that I've answered them adequately. And it's been a pleasure to to present on this topic. M&E is a field that is in demand. And like I mentioned before, it doesn't matter which field you're in. There are a lot of public health specialists who are also M&E specialists because they are more well placed to monitor and evaluate public health projects, right? Because it requires subject matter expertise. So this is something that you could always do in the future. After your studies, you can get a postgraduate diploma or certificate in M&E and then get practical experience and learn on the job. And so just keep on working on your skills whilst you're working towards your degree. Make sure that you get the requisite skills. Usually the M&E positions, you have to do written assessments. They will test your quantitative skills. They will test your written skills, your analytical. So your best bet is to make sure that you have the right skills for it. Yeah, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much once again. And viewers, this is our second episode of the capacity building program. And then today we are here with Mr. Yahya Touray, a monitoring and evaluation specialist. I'm Abdullah Waibojang from the caption. And then I'm here with my co-host, Mohammed Jassi. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. And this has been really great. And Mr. Touray, we are really grateful having you here. It's been really educative and fruitful, honestly. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you once again. You're here.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks, Mama.
Abdullah.
Thanks, Abdullah. Yeah.
Okay.
So this brings us to the end of the event. Bye.